Should kids do HEMA? Don't know. What do you think? Hello and welcome to the HEMA Show. Like always, I'm your host Stuart. This is edited by Andy. Say hello, Andy. Andy edits these and generally takes the piss out of me post-production. I'm assuming he just did then. Bastard. So, today's session, what are we looking at today? Today we're discussing whether or not kids should do HEMA. Honestly, no. Not at all. Well, yes, in my opinion though. But no at the same time. Done. HEMA show. Off we go. No, joking. So, kids should do martial arts. They really should. I think kids doing martial arts, it gives them a huge access to discipline, gives them huge access to fitness, and it gives them an opportunity to understand their bodies in certain ways that they don't get from other sports. The combativeness of a martial art shows them that they actually can hurt someone. Even though they're smaller and younger than the average person, they can still hurt people. And it really does show that kids doing martial arts really gives them a huge amount of respect and understanding as well. So it's really good for their developmental or behavioural developmental keystones. Boxing, for example, is hugely beneficial for kids. I'm always a massive supporter of kids doing boxing. Not necessarily because kids should fight or anything like that, but I have seen so many times, so many kids joining boxing gyms and gaining respect and discipline and really straightening themselves out when they've been on kind of a wayward path. So from that point of view, I think any kid doing a martial art is a fantastic decision. It's really good, it's incredibly supportive of them. But this is kind of where it gets contentious. As a club leader, as a club owner, as the person who pays the insurance, no, absolutely not. And I don't think you'll find an insurance company in the world that will let you arm children and then have them go ham at each other. It's just not going to happen, unfortunately. Even fencing, coming from the fencing world myself, getting insurance for fencing is just a nightmare. And any of you that are British fencing affiliates, if you actually have looked at the small print of your insurance, I think you'll probably be quite amazed. I have, and it really wasn't what I was expecting. So getting the insurance alone just for kids to do HEMA is an absolute nightmare, and I imagine you probably wouldn't be able to get it done. And if you can't find the insurance, it can't happen. It's as simple as that, really. So whilst I think it could be a hugely beneficial thing for kids to do, developmentally and physically, I just don't think realistically, feasibly, it is doable. And then the other angle of it is sometimes, and I mean this as nicely as possible, sometimes kids are a pain in the ass. Now, I have my own child. I love her dearly. But by God, sometimes you put them to bed and you go, right, let's be human again. And that's someone who wanted a kid. That is someone who loves their child dearly. If you're not that into kids and HEMA is your hobby, and suddenly you've got kids at your sport, it can have a huge effect on your club. I've seen it happen in fencing clubs where some of the kids go from the junior sessions up to the adult sessions, and legally, numerically, they are old enough to be there, but cognitively and behaviourally, they're not quite mature enough. And I've really seen some adults have their hobby, not ruined, but severely hampered or affected by children, effectively children, joining their clubs. Some adults really not okay with hitting kids. Shocker, I know. Some adults just will not have that confidence. Some adults will not be comfortable, in our situation, in our context, raising a weapon to a child and actually trying to hit them. It can be incredibly distressing for some people. From the other point of view, some people just don't like kids. You know, you just don't like kids. And some people don't, and that's okay. And if you are one of these people that doesn't like kids, and suddenly kids are coming into your club, it can really affect that. And never forget, who are the ones that pay the bills at the end of the day? It's the adults. Even if you have kids coming into the club, it's their parents that are paying the bill. So it's always adults that pay your membership. And if you find that you start getting loads of annoying kids coming in, you'll find that you start losing adults from the other side of stuff. So behaviourally, I think kids could also be detrimental to a club. Now, this isn't to say that kids shouldn't do HEMA. It's all leading towards that a little bit. But maybe there's a happy middle place that we can find. I don't think HEMA in the way that we currently see it, in the way that it currently is suitable for kids at all. It's a lot of big people hitting each other with weapons, and I don't think it's safe enough. I don't think it's insurable, and I don't think that the behaviours or the people would mix overly well. But that doesn't mean to say that HEMA can't necessarily change and we can have a junior HEMA. I think this is something that we really should, as a community, be looking at. Foam swords are a thing. Foam swords exist. I think that the HEMA community should be looking to get kids involved. Kids love swords. And I think HEMA clubs should really be looking at how they can diversify their clubs and what they do by bringing kids in junior-only sessions. Minimal kit, but foam swords, masks, some sort of tabard, armoured overlay, like any fences out there, the plastic Go Fence kit, the tabard you have over the top would be perfect. I've got tons of it in the loft. I think that would be brilliant, and that's where we should be looking at to get kids into HEMA. And really, why I think HEMA, all those things aside that I just said shouldn't be for kids, why I think HEMA would be good for kids if it's in a controlled child version of HEMA. The reason why I think it would be good is because it's a non-typical sport. You kind of got your normal sporty kids that like running around, can do cross-country, love a bit of football, love a bit of rugby, and then you have your non-traditional sporty kids. I see this all the time with fencing. The slightly introverted kids, the kids that maybe don't go for the traditional sports or are slightly nervous or have some sort of neurodivergency. These are the kids that would really benefit from this, an alternative sport and something slightly nerdy, really. Essentially, if we're being honest with ourselves, we're quite nerdy. We're quite a nerdy lot. Something on the nerdy spectrum would really appeal to a huge amount of kids that are just being completely missed by sports. And I think if we could somehow gear HEMA up to hit that clientele or that category of child, we could really introduce some kids to something great that will stick with them for a while. And I think the fact that it's slightly historical and it can really help the kids learning and understanding and adding context to the things that they'll be hearing outside, out in the world, I think it would be really, really good. So I think that that's where we probably should be looking. So roundabout, I don't think kids probably should be doing what we're considering HEMA. What I think should happen is HEMA should meet the kids halfway and start providing things for these kids. And then when they get old enough, then they can come into the HEMA clubs. That's my just two thoughts on it anyway. I know some people will disagree. I know some people will be very, very pro children joining their clubs, and that's fine. Not for me, not for my club. I don't want to get sued when a kid makes a mistake or gets hurt. But each club to their own. And I'm not gonna cast stones if another club wants to have kids in. And likewise, there are going to be some clubs that are just like, absolutely not, never in a million years. I hate kids, don't want them in there. They're going to be really annoying and they're going to mess it up. Equally, fine. That's your club. That's your decision. That's cool. I just think maybe we should meet them halfway. Cool. So that's my thoughts on it. I wonder what your thoughts are with children into HEMA. Is it a good thing? Do you think that potentially behaviourally it could really help them, like I think? Do you think that you would happily have kids in your HEMA club? Or do you think that your HEMA club shouldn't have kids? Would it be a detriment if your HEMA club had kids involved? I'll be really interested to see what you guys think. So with that, on to the Q&A section. Okay, so today's question comes from Brian, one of my students actually. So Brian says, I've recently gone to a single-handed weapon system and I find that my offhand gets tired. How can I strengthen that up? Giggity, 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 giggity. So really interesting question. And what this is much more of an intermediates question where somebody has done the basics on a two-handed weapon system. I happen to know that Brian was introduced with longsword by one of my other coaches actually. And I've done a fair bit of longsword with Brian as well. And he's recently gone on to having a fair bit of interest with arming sword and side sword, and he's using a buckler with it. And what he tends to find is his offhand, he's right-handed, his offhand is getting tired whilst he's fighting. So the reason this is essentially you've gone from a two-handed weapon system to a single-handed weapon system. Now, what people don't realise, but is actually blindingly obvious, that in a two-handed weapon system, one arm is only ever taking 50% of the stress and the load. Obviously, you have a weight, which is the sword. Half of the sword is taken in one hand, half of the sword is taken in the other hand. When you start to separate it out, each arm is responsible for 100% of the burden and the load. And it can be really, really tricky if you've got one side that you're not trained properly. You can get extremely tired. So using that example, say arming sword and buckler, for example. I know Brian's been struggling here with it dropping down and getting tired. It's because it's your offhand and it's not used to being in that situation. So one thing I would recommend, and this is kind of me digging back into my personal training days of strengthening it up, is when you're at the gym, when you're working out, just try extension-based exercises. Now this is completely free of weight. I'm going to switch into profile. Excellent. So what you need to do is just train weight-free at a nice long distance and then relax, long, relax, long. Just weight-free, just get used to your arm being in that position. Never be surprised at how just a simple body position can completely throw off any durability you have in the muscles. The muscles are acting in a way they're totally not used to. So your muscles are having to work harder because they're not used to being in this situation. You go adding the weight of a buckler into it, all of a sudden you are fighting a losing battle. But there are other things you can do. I recommend those big stretchy elastic bands. Step on one of them, raise up and down, anything like that. But also rotation here. The rotator cuff in the shoulder and the deltoid here, really important. People always go straight to the biceps and the triceps. In my opinion, in HEMA, the biceps are next to useless. Triceps pretty important, but not for this situation. The deltoid is where we need to be. Strengthen up the shoulders, but also strengthen up the upper back. The traps in the upper back here is really important. You need to be able to have the infrastructure in your back to support the shoulder, so the shoulder can hold something up. So any action where you raise up when you're working out is going to hugely help. Any raising action. And for you, in this situation, you want to raise up, hold, and down. It's not about the weight, it's about the position, which is what you need to be practicing. And then when you are fighting, when you are using that buckler, because it's all about context, like I keep banging on about, when you are using that buckler, as you get tired, don't come out of that position to give yourself a rest. Come back a little bit, just give yourself time to shake off and then come forwards again. There's no pleasant way of making that off arm stronger. You've just got to push through and make it work. So you just need to practice those positions and just bolster it with other things. But it will get there, I promise. But don't, the one thing I would say is don't come out of position and just completely, if you're here, for example, any of these positions, the last thing you want to do is go, oh man, I'm tired. Okay, I'm going to go to a guard forward position, drop the buckler back or anything like that. Okay, stay in those positions. You need to get your body used to it. It's not pleasant, but you know, it's a workout. It never is. So, Brian, I hope that helps, mate. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye. Fuck, I've forgotten the question.